Yeah, it's on.
Good afternoon, I'm glad you all came, and I have some special memories to share about my friends Pat and Ed. I met Pat first when I came. I was snowbirding from Montana, and she was my first contact for the concert band, which I played for a few years. And you know, you call the house, you know, to talk to them, but Ed would answer, and he'd say, "The White House," and that just cracked me up the first time I heard "of course." But anyway, I sat next to her in concert band, and she was dear to me. And when I was having some trouble with my daughter, she would always ask me how she was doing. She always cared. And then Ed was in concert band. Of course, he was also known as Eduardo Blanco. And I used to crack up about that, too. He always had a little quip back in the euphonium section, you know, well, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. I said, oh, and Pat would just go, okay. And, I kept bugging, I'm here to play with the All-Stars today, and the reason why is because I was bugging, and please let me play, please, please. And I only had an alto sax, and he says, well, I don't need an alto sax, I need a tenor sax. So I said, you hold that open, and I'll buy a tenor sax for your band, and I did. And I've been having fun ever since. And those two people, I love them still today, like my own parents, and I'll never, never forget them. So that's my little story about my dear friends, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much. George Zoski. Hope I'm getting close.
Thank you. I'm very happy to say that Joyce and I have known Pat and Ed for a long time. When we moved to Arizona some 24 years ago, we met Pat and Ed, and it was through music. And I think another issue that was prominent in why we got to know each other was our connection to Madison, Wisconsin. Kathy was born in Madison, and Ed served at Truex Field in Madison, and I at that time played in the Madison Symphony, so we had a lot of things to talk about, and over the years we would reminisce frequently. Ed and Pat loved organ music, and during Advent season, the American Lutheran Church would give Advent organ concerts, and he and Pat would come over and thoroughly enjoy that. And at one occasion, Joyce and I drove with Pat and Ed to California to hear an organ recital at this beautiful congregational church. Another time we went, he took the All-Stars to California to play for a convention. I think it was a congregational convention that we played, and that was a lot of fun. And then on that particular trip, Ed made the point of getting a tour of the Canstill Instrument Company. It's a brass instrument company. They make just top-line instruments, and it was a real thrill. And one of the things that I had hoped to do is try playing their contra-bass trombone, because they're one of, I think, the only companies, or at least one of the few, that make that. And sadly, they only had the bell section. They didn't have a slide made, but I had a picture there with me holding the contrabass bell. Pat and Ed loved any kind of good music. They would attend the Phoenix Symphony regularly, and on one occasion we were driving with them, and it shows the patience that Ed had, as we were caught in one of these horrendous traffic jams on I-10, and we were concerned whether we were going to get to the concert on time. And you could see that possibly Ed was boiling underneath, but he was cool as a cucumber on his outer being. So It shows that, there are many sides of individuals, and we always saw the good side. And one of the things that was unique with Ed and the All-Stars is that after every performance, even after every rehearsal, he would thank you personally for playing, which I think was, a very, very wonderful type of gesture on his part. And you knew that when we would play a performance, he was really proud of the group because he'd be beaming and, loved it and just thought the world of the people that were a part of that group. When it got to the point where Ed was leery about leaving Pat alone at home when he had to come here to rehearse the All-Stars, we realized that, that's a very serious situation and a very tenuous situation for Ed. So I would drop Joyce off at their house, and Joyce would spend the time with Pat while he was here rehearsing the band. And Joyce had a good time with Pat, and they would do lots of things to pass the time. And it was, I'm sure that Ed appreciated it, and it was a pleasure for us. So it's a tender thing when anyone has to leave this world, but knowing Pat and Ed, they were ready for it, and Kathy and your family, we certainly, it's belated, but we extend our sympathy to you, but we know that now they're in a good place, and they don't have to worry about any problems anymore. And who knows, Ed might be finding a band up there. But God bless you, Kathy, and your family, and God bless Pat and Ed and their souls. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Berg.
Thank you, and it's such a privilege for me to be here today and say a few words in remembrance of Pat and Ed. Just because I didn't want to forget anything, I jotted them down. Pat and Ed, to me, symbolize Psalm 100 without a doubt. That psalm opens with, "Shout joyfully to the Lord. Serve him with jubilation." Now, there wasn't a thing that Ed and Pat did that wasn't with joy and with jubilation. I think you'll all agree to that. Ed and Pat served our Lord in every aspect of their lives. When Jack, my husband, and I first moved to Arizona, we looked for the Sun City Concert Band. Being both musicians, we wanted to keep our music foremost in our activities. Ed was president at that time of the Sun City Concert Band, and his effervescence and his joy did a lot to influence us into becoming members of the Congregational Church as well as the concert band. I accompanied both Ed on his euphonium or the trombone and Pat on the clarinet many times, as well as singing together. Now that, I'm not going to say any more, except we had a great time singing together. When Ed decided to form the All-Stars, I was invited to be the assistant pianist or the substitute pianist because Naomi Hoffman, as at that time, loved to play the piano and she was the main pianist. However, she also liked to sing. So whenever she had a chance to sing, usually a Dixieland or something like that, and she was great. But anyway, that gave me a chance to play piano. So I enjoyed it from the beginning of this marvelous band. So 26 or so years, and I've seen a lot come and go, and a lot of things happen. I think I'm the last surviving member, and that's an awesome thing to say. However, we had some great musicians in the band, some ups and downs in the band, and Ed held us all together, and we had some wonderful times to look back on. It's not the same as we do miss Ed, but Dwayne Moore is bringing us back now that COVID kept us apart for 2 years. That's a lot to overcome because the band develops a respect for each other, an ear for each other, and you know what's happening or what's supposed to happen when it doesn't. So, Ed and Pat were a wonderful team and examples to use to all of us for dedication to our Lord, to our community, as they were very active in a lot of things in Sun City, to our families, and above all, to our mates. So Pat and Ed, we thank you for being part of our lives, and thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thanks.
It's very nice.
Lenny King.
Hello, everybody. My name is Len King, and I've only been here about 10 years, but I really love that family. My wife and I moved here in Surprise in 2012, and I quickly learned that Ed White was a very important man in the musical activities of the Sun City communities. I discovered he was a trombone player, which I am, a board member and member of the Sun City Concert Band, a member and manager of the All Stars Big Band, and was probably involved in some of the other activities that I really didn't even know about at that time. But I thought, in my mind, wow, this man is Mr. Music around here. I also learned he was friendly, pleasant, upbeat, and had a great sense of humor. I invited Ed to sub on trombone and the Swing Kings several times. He did a great job. And he had a great voice, so I invited him to be an announcer for some of our concerts. And his personality and his voice really showed well there. Ed and I were both big fans of the Stan Kenton Orchestra. And he gave me copies of a couple of his Kenton CDs that I didn't already have. It's very nice of him. He was such a gracious and thoughtful man. He visited my wife Joan in the hospital on 2 different occasions, and we both appreciated that very much. So, to sum it all up, Ed touched many lives in this community and left us the legacy and the privilege of knowing and loving the Sun City music man, Ed White.
Thanks, Len.
Thank you. And Jane Higgs.
This is the part where the microphone is supposed to go dead. I just have to say to your family is that when Ed passed, I couldn't believe it and I couldn't come to grips with it. And I still have a difficult time because he was very instrumental in my life. And we always appreciated when you came to visit our church because you were part of our family. In 1999, when my husband and I retired in Sun City, it it wasn't long before I found that our little Paradise Park had a jazz band entitled the Encores. Ed played trombone in that band, as did Bert Johnson, the Congregational Church choir director, while Ed was the minister. Throughout that 2000 year, I was asked to sing at the church several times, and when Ed retired, Bert decided that he would also retire at the same time. They asked me if I would like to do the job of choir director, and that became 17 years of directing the choir at that point. Ed and Pat were members of the choir, and I remember every Christmas they would go south to spend the holidays with the kids. After missing their singing at several Christmas cantatas, I moved that special cantata Sunday to earlier in the month, so they wouldn't miss it, and we wouldn't miss their lovely voices. Both, they were in the concert band, as you mentioned, and Ed told us many times that he wasn't the real musician, that Pat was the real musician. She played in the orchestra and in many clarinet ensembles, but of all the instruments that Ed played, I would have to say the euphonium was the one that just, my heart just fluttered. It was his inner beauty and love of music that came out in that horn, not in the trombone, but in that euphonium. Ed's favorite project was the All-Star Jazz Band, and he always promoted it as the premier jazz band of the west side of town. When we had to have special rehearsals at their home, Pat was a trooper. She let us move her furniture all over that house so we could fit 20 band members in there. The All-Stars had several CDs we recorded when he was our manager. The sound engineer that he used also was the sound engineer for Carlos Nakai. So it wasn't your neighbor next door recording. We had real professionals recording us. Another high point was Ed booking the 4 freshmen at the Congregational Church. We had the Bardi Wranglers 3 or 4 times. So Ed basically could sell ice to Eskimos. And I mean, he was a promoter, and it was amazing. But I have to tell you about this road trip that we had to California to play for the National Association of Congregational Churches in Anaheim in 2006. It came with a story. Now, I brought this CD, so I'll put it in the back if you want to take a picture of these shirts. I did not vote for these shirts. They're orange and white striped shirts, which, you know how good orange looks on everyone. I think I was the dissenter on that, but I lost. And so we won, we had to wear those shirts. While visiting the local mall that day, several of the people who were in the mall came up to us and asked, where were we from and what group were we with? Well, Cal Abbott, who was a comedian, said, we're from the Sun City skydiving team, from Sun City, Arizona. And that says it all. We had always had a good time together. Ed, when we were asked to play again at the convention, but it was in Scottsdale, we had those lovely blue shirts, which you'll see the band has on today. We've really come up in the world. I have to say that both Ed and Pat enriched many lives in Sun City and were instrumental in providing many experiences for us that we wouldn't have happened if not for them. And his patriotism and support were awesome. They were just so wonderful. So I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to meet and work with many, many fine musicians that wouldn't have happened without their leadership. Thank you.